Happy Halloween everybody and welcome back to the channel. Last Halloween, I decided to take a look at the scarier side of the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise with a video covering who I believe to be 10 of its scariest animatronics, and with the spookiest season of the year rolling around again, I decided that round 2 was long overdue. Despite often being denounced by the general public for its use of jump scares, Five Nights at Freddy's is a franchise that has still managed to provide quite a few intense and terrifying moments throughout its history. So, to celebrate Halloween of 2021, I have decided to cover what I consider to be the top 10 scariest Five Nights at Freddy's moments. Before I begin, I would like to quickly clarify that this list will not be referring to animatronic designs or jump scares, since the former was the subject of my previous Halloween special, and the latter will likely receive a ranking of its own in the future. Instead, this special will focus on story and gameplay moments within the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise that I believe to be especially terrifying or unnerving. However, if either designs or jump scares come into play within a particular moment, then they will be addressed. Before we get into the main list, let's quickly cover some honorable mentions, alternatively known as numbers 15 to 11. Night 5 of Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is quite unnerving, as it not only focuses on one of the franchise's most terrifying animatronics, but provides a glimpse into one of the story's most important moments. While the fake ending of Sister Location may seem like a triumphant ending at first, this is quickly undercut by the discovery that Innard has managed to escape from the facility and has silently followed you home. The scene fades to black as this unsettling tangle of wires slowly inches towards you, as its eye flashes ominously and its cables scrape against the floor. The salvage segments of Pizzeria Simulator are honestly the most intense part of the game, as you are faced with each of the game's 4 terrifying antagonists and must carefully monitor their movements, documenting their responses to auditory stimuli and shocking them should they get too close to you. The differences in their positions are difficult to notice, which only adds to the intensity of these segments, which itself is amplified by the later revelation of each character's role in the story. While game over screens are usually unremarkable in this franchise, there are 2 exceptions to this pattern. One of these is Curse of Dreadbear, which takes place in a dimly lit cemetery, as both of the DLC's main antagonists surround you. A titanic Dreadbear attempts to grab you with a haunting laugh, while Grim Foxy scratches away at the barricades while flames erupt from his frame. And the final honorable mention will go to first encountering Springtrap in Special Delivery. A first encounter with Springtrap can be enough to make your heart pound like an earthquake, due to his reputation, rarity, and unusual mechanics. Now that all 5 honorable mentions have been discussed, let's move on to the countdown, starting with number 10. One moment within the series that I do not think gets enough credit is Night 6's phone call in Five Nights at Freddy's 2. At this point in the game, the toy animatronic's malicious behavior has become known to the rest of the staff, leading to the pizzeria being put on lockdown. Nevertheless, Fitzgerald returns for a 6th night. As to be expected, you are greeted by a phone call from Phone Guy. However, he seems noticeably distressed, and it can be unnerving to hear a character, who has previously been portrayed as calm and well composed, sound as if he is about to crack under the stress of the situation.
Hello. What on earth are you doing there? Didn't you get the memo? The place is closed down, at least for a while.
His report of another mass murder is complemented perfectly by the arrival of Golden Freddy and, despite later proving to be a red herring, provides a haunting hint towards the identity of the killer's suit.
Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right.
Finally, the icing on the cake is some chilling foreshadowing towards later events, such as the Bite of 87.
We have one more event scheduled for tomorrow, a birthday. You'll be on day shift. Wear your uniform. Stay close to the animatronics and make sure they don't hurt anyone, okay?
And Phone Guy's night shift that will ultimately result in his untimely demise.
When the place eventually opens again, I'll probably take a night shift myself.
Ultimately, while some of the honorable mentions may technically be scarier, I felt that this moment deserves special attention, since the unusual urgency and panic in Phone Guy's voice perfectly supplements the rising tension, in terms of both story and gameplay. One of the most important events in the entire timeline is the missing children incident. Despite never being shown to us, this event is still unnerving in concept, as a group of 5 children are murdered and entombed within the 5 main animatronics. An effective glimpse into the horrors of this event was eventually provided in Help Wanted, where, after completing every main stage, you are greeted to a final stage known as the Pizza Party. Upon selecting this stage, you are dropped into a dark and complicated maze composed of various locations from throughout the game. Immediately, you are on a clock to find the pizza party while avoiding various animatronics, even including some of the scariest, such as Mangle, Springtrap, and Inard. All the while, the stage is accompanied by a slow, haunting tune that morbidly conveys the sense that death is inevitable. Taking too long to find the party will result in you being attacked by a mysterious, shadowy version of Freddy, with a blood-red aura surrounding his eyes and teeth. However, successful navigation will lead you to your final destination, the pizza party itself. Initially, you are met with a sense of relief, as you are granted whatever flavors of cake and pizza you chose on your way. However, the morbid truth of this stage is revealed when Glitchtrap, the Springtrap-like malware that has been watching you for the entire game, emerges from behind a curtain and beckons you to follow him. Following him will result in your perspective being changed to that of Freddy Fazbear, and as you watch Glitchtrap creepily dancing from the stage, it becomes clear that you have just played a recreation of Freddy's unsettling backstory. Perhaps one of the most stressful situations imaginable is trying to remain as quiet as possible, where the smallest sound can have dire consequences. This is especially apparent during what I believe to be the scariest gameplay segment of Sister Location, the Ballora Gallery. In order to reboot the facility's power, you must reach the breaker room. But to get there, you must traverse through the Ballora Gallery, a vast, empty void patrolled by the sound-sensitive Ballora. In another display of fatal ignorance, Hand Unit advises that you rush through the gallery as quickly as possible, but doing so will rapidly result in death. Instead, as advised by the equally untrustworthy Baby, you must crawl at the pace of my internet speed, while occasionally stopping and listening out for Ballora's elegant but unsettling music as she spins around the perimeter. When you finally reach the halfway point, you are greeted by a ear-drum-shatteringly loud reminder by Hand Unit to hurry up.
It seems you are taking a long time. Please proceed as quickly and as quietly as possible.
Which can come as quite a shock after trying to remain as quiet as possible. Shortly afterwards, the tension rises higher as death slowly and calmly spins past you, seemingly unaware of your presence. Unfortunately, after an equally stressful session of rebooting the facility's power, you must once again attempt to sneak past Ballora, who has now become much more wary of a potential intruder. As you slowly inch through the darkness, your heart may suddenly race as a calmly sinister voice echoes their suspicion.
Is someone there? I can hear someone creeping through my room.
And of course, failure to keep your own noise down will result in your untimely demise, as Ballora drops down to reveal her piercing purple pupils and minuscule but menacing teeth. How ironic that, Despite the Five Nights at Freddy's series emphasizing terror through your inability to move, a traditional free roam stage would turn out to be one of its most terrifying. The corn maze is seemingly intended to be the final stage of Curse of Dreadbear, and this fantastic DLC certainly went out with a bang. Upon starting, you are immediately thrown into a complicated corn maze, littered with cardboard cutouts of various characters. These set pieces will turn out to be your only chance of survival, as the labyrinth is patrolled by the menacing Grim Foxy, who looks as if he has stepped out from hell itself. This demon keeps the tension at an all-time high by humming in a demonically low-pitched tone, scraping his sickle against the fences bordering the area, and charging at you with fiery ferocity. If Grim Foxy catches you, then you must swiftly duck into a nearby cardboard cutout, watching as he either charges or stalks past you. The goal of the game is to quickly find one of 4 keys and escape from your potential resting place. However, if you decide to collect all 4 keys, a severe challenge due to Grim Foxy's increasing aggression, then you will be able to access a mysterious trapdoor within your starting area. Venturing into the abyss will reveal the sinister tease for the next game in the series. On night 4 of Sister Location, we learn that Michael Afton is not the only technician working at Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental, as 2 more technicians can be heard preparing Ballora to be scooped. Understandably, the pair are both suspicious of the animatronic's constant malfunctions and unnerved by the mysterious facility.
Okay, bring her over. Forward. 1 more. Okay, stop. Set her down. Watch the step.
What happened to it this time? Just seems like these things can't go a day without breaking down.
Who knows? It's always the same, man. Some kind of hardware malfunction.
Well, hey, I have to be somewhere in 15 minutes, and this place gives me the creeps. Can we just get this over with?
It's all automated. We don't have to be here for it. Just get her on the rollers and we can go.
At the beginning of night 5, Hand Unit informs us that the technicians have strangely not left the facility after completing the work, and as we routinely check on the Ballora Gallery and Funtime Auditorium, we quickly learn the reason why.
Great. Now let's check on Funtime Foxy. Great. It looks like everything is as it should be in Funtime Auditorium.
The lifeless corpses of the 2 technicians can be seen hanging above the abandoned stages, in what is actually the very first appearance of humans outside of a minigame. On top of this being a very grim discovery, the additional absence of the ever-watching clown mask suggests that a much more dangerous animatronic now roams the facility, with these 2 hapless technicians being its first victims. This idea makes the ending of the blacklight version of Ennard's Vent Repair in Help Wanted seem so much darker. How on earth does this franchise consistently manage to make red light, green light such a petrifying experience? In my opinion, the scariest stage in not only Curse of Dreadbear, but also Help Wanted, is the hallway crawl. Just as the corn maze was an intense finale, the hallway crawl manages to be an equally intense introduction to the DLC. This stage involves you slowly crawling through one of the hallways of the Five Nights at Freddy's 4 house, during a calm but furious thunderstorm. Your first obstacle is perhaps the most unnerving, as you will occasionally be confronted by Nightmare Foxy, who will charge towards you if you make even the slightest movement, requiring you to remain as still as a statue until he either disappears or morphs into an innocent-looking foxy plush. All the while, you must be extremely cautious as to where you decide to stop, as to avoid meeting your demise in the claws of either Nightmare Bonnie or Nightmare Chica, who will frequently emerge from several doorways on both sides of the hall. Finally, after reaching the second half of the hall, an extra sense of dread will be aroused by a familiar screeching sound. In addition to frequently stopping, you must also make sure to keep moving at a considerable rate, otherwise Nightmare Freddy will quickly catch up to you. Even if you manage to reach the safety of your room, Nightmare Freddy's shadow will be looming over you, a reminder of the immense amount of tension built up by this magnificently terrifying stage. While the first Five Nights at Freddy's is far from my favorite game in the series, I will admit that it has one of the most effective atmospheres that really puts you on edge. This is most apparent in the event that you run out of power. Using up all of your power will result in all of the pizzeria's lights and electronics shutting down, leaving you completely defenseless, or, at least, more than you already were. The aggressive whirring of the fan, your only company, is replaced with a calm but haunting drone, emphasizing the dark emptiness that awaits you. Once the drone begins to fade away, you are soon greeted by Freddy Fazbear, who simply stands in your left doorway with an ominous, shimmering glow, as he juxtaposes your impending death with a strangely soothing tune known as the Toreador March. The song's lyrics describe the fame that comes with the victory for a bullfighter, implying that Freddy is taking a moment to celebrate his victory before homing in on his prey as they wait in anxious horror. After a few seconds of the jingle, the brief illumination that you were spared vanishes, leaving you in complete darkness. As Freddy approaches you with heavy footsteps, you are soon treated to one of the most iconic jump scares in horror history. After a torrent of static, the Night Guard's ultimate fate is encapsulated in a morbidly horrifying game over screen. The game over screens of the later games are much blander by comparison, simply displaying a generic game over message, with a dash of red to imply your gruesome fate. The game over screen of the first game, by contrast, is much more effective, showing the Night Guard entombed within a Freddy Fazbear suit, crushed and diced by the electronics within, with only their partially dismembered eyeballs and teeth ever seeing the light of day again, a fate that may have befell numerous Night Guards beforehand. The first Five Nights at Freddy's has an excellent game over system, keeping the player on edge as their fate awaits them and reminding them of the consequences of their failure. However, this is not the scariest moment that the game has to offer, as that will be covered later. For me, part of what makes Springtrap one of the series' most terrifying antagonists is not only his decrepit design and intimidating presence, but also his gruesome backstory. Upon returning to the first game's pizzeria to destroy the evidence of his murders, William Afton was confronted and cornered by the spirits of his victims, sending him into a panicked frenzy. In desperation, he made the reckless mistake of dressing up in the unstable Spring Bonnie costume, confronting his victims in the same visage that he had worn when he took their lives. Believing that he could not be touched, Afton began to laugh uncontrollably as rainwater bled from the building's degrading structure. His hubris was his downfall, as he had forgotten about the suit's fatal flaw that had claimed the lives of so many employees beforehand. The sudden movements and increasing moisture caused the suit's safeguards to break loose, leading to the animatronic endoskeleton violently snapping back into place and gruesomely mutilating Afton's body. The Silver Rise goes into greater detail surrounding the unnerving nature of death by spring lock malfunctions, revealing that it results in a slow and excruciating demise, as the victim is painfully dismembered and eventually drowns as blood floods their lungs. While Afton's heinous acts of child murder and experimentation ensured that he would be punished severely, the fate that he ultimately received would be considered horrifying even by the standards of the medieval era. However, even this excruciating execution would not mark the end of William Afton's story, as he would later come back. He always does. Ultimate Custom Night is actually the inverse of the original Five Nights at Freddy's to me. While I enjoy the more involved gameplay of Ultimate Custom Night, which makes it one of my favorite games in the series, I would not say that it is necessarily scary, just more overwhelming. That said, it still managed to produce one of the franchise's darkest moments by utilizing one of its most obscure characters, Old Man Consequences. By setting Old Man Consequences to a difficulty level of 1 and everybody else to 0, and eventually catching his fish as usual, you will be transported to the 4th subtunnel from FNAF World. Its blood red aesthetic being very fitting for a game that takes in a hell-like dimension. Speaking to Old Man Consequences will prompt him to request that you leave a certain demon to his demons and rest your own soul, insisting that there is nothing else. Complying with this request involves immersing yourself deep within the nearby pond, after which point the game will abruptly crash. However, the most interesting thing to take note of is an ominously low-pitched and distorted sound in the background. While this sound is already fairly unnerving in this condition, speeding it up and increasing the pitch reveals its disturbing secret. Since the setting is implied by numerous voice lines to be a purgatory state created for William Afton by one of his victims, we can deduce that this voice belongs to Afton himself, cursing the two people who set up his second demise, while screaming in insufferable agony. This scene is very disturbing, not only because of the unnerving context, but also because it shows how literally anybody can be transformed from an innocent soul into a cold-blooded monster, as shown by Golden Freddy's complacency at Afton's tortured misery, in return for causing the deaths of both of his spirits all those decades ago. It is very likely that, had Old Man Consequences not intervened, then William Afton and Golden Freddy would have remained in a constant cycle of agony and satisfaction for all eternity. However, despite this being a disturbing moment, there is one that I consider to be even creepier. And finally, we have reached number 1, and for this, we return to the original Five Nights at Freddy's. So, what do I consider to be the scariest moment in the entire franchise? Judging by the game selected, some of you may have already guessed as to what it is, so I will just play it to you now.
Oh, hey, wow, day 4, I knew you could do it. Hey, listen, I may not be around to send you a message tomorrow. It's been a bad night here for me. I'm kind of glad that I recorded my messages for you when I did. Hey, do me a favor. Maybe sometime you could check inside those suits in the back room. I'm going to try to hold out until someone checks. Maybe it won't be so bad. Yeah, I always wondered what was in all those empty heads back there. You know. Oh no.
As predictable as this may have been, in my opinion, the scariest moment in all of Five Nights at Freddy's is the demise of the phone guy in Night 4's phone call. Throughout the previous 3 phone calls, phone guy attempts to downplay the danger of the animatronics, no doubt an attempt to keep the night guard from quitting.
But I've got to tell you, there's nothing to worry about. You'll do fine.
As a result, it can be considered to be morbidly karmic that phone guy's last moments involve him being surrounded by the very animatronics that he attempted to brush off as harmless. Despite doom surrounding from all sides, phone guy still manages to maintain his calm and composed demeanor, even during his final words. Which only adds to the tragedy of the situation. The disturbing tone is further amplified by the fact that all 5 of the animatronics played a role in his demise. Foxy can be heard banging on the door. Freddy can be heard playing his music, either Bonnie or Chica can be heard moaning creepily, and the call is ended by Golden Freddy's vicious scream. Assuming that Michael Afton is not the only person who the animatronics mistake for William Afton, this scene could also be interpreted as a prelude to the revenge that they have planned for the man who cut their lives short. The fact that phone guy's remains are nowhere to be seen backstage, and yet no report of his disappearance has been filed, also emphasizes the moral ambiguity of the company that you are currently serving. However, what makes this scene terrifying the most is that Phone Guy, up to this point, has been your only lifeline in a dangerous and suspicious job. Having that stripped away helps to emphasize the increasing aggression of the animatronics as, while you were listening to your advisor's demise, they had already begun their next assault. Ultimately, due to its effective terror and ambiguity, I personally consider Night 4's phone call in the original Five Nights at Freddy's to be the scariest moment in the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. And with that concludes my second Halloween special. Before the video ends, I would like to apologize for my 2-month-long absence. For more details, feel free to view my most recent community post. However, I have finally returned to making YouTube videos, starting with this Halloween special. As for my next video, it will likely be either another Five Nights at Freddy's theory or something Transformers related. However, regardless of what it is, I can assure that I will not be gone for 2 months again. With everything said, that will be all for this video. Thank you for watching and happy Halloween.